Part 2. The Forging.
You will be rebuilt through rhythm.
The Norse smiths had a saying, "The iron does not become a blade by wishing. It becomes a blade by fire, by hammer, by the patient, repeated work of a man who knows what he is making and does not stop until the metal holds the edge." You have read Part 1. You understand the enemy. You know the patterns of the untrained mind, the noise, the negotiator, the cost of unchecked reactivity. You have looked at the iron clearly. Now we put it in the fire. Part 2 is where the actual work begins. Not the preparation, not the understanding, the work. And the work is simple even when it is not easy. You are going to learn cadence. You are going to learn breath. You are going to learn to hold formation inside your own mind when everything in you wants to break ranks. The men who follow Goggins and Jocko and Frizella, the men who grind, who train, who have built real discipline around physical work, often assume they already have this. They don't. Not yet. The gym gives you cover. The run strips it away. What you are about to build is different from anything you have built before, because it operates in the one environment where all the external scaffolding disappears, and you are left alone with your own mind. That is where the real forging happens. And it is where the real transfer into your daily life occurs. Take the work one chapter at a time, one run at a time, 1 mile at a time. The fire is ready. Step into it. Chapter 6. Enter cadence. You have been running without a system, and a warrior without a system is just a man making noise. If you have tried running before and quit, if you are the man who has started and stopped enough times that you stopped telling people when you were trying again, the problem was not your legs, your schedule, or your willpower. The problem was that you were running against your own biology without knowing it. You were trying to sustain an effort that your brain had no mechanism to reward. And the brain, when it finds no reward in an activity, will find every possible reason to stop doing it. What I am about to give you is the mechanism that changes that. It is not a motivational technique. It is not a mindset hack. It is a physiological system that has been used to move men through impossible distances for over a century. And once you understand it, you will never approach a run the same way again. Before I tell you what cadence will do for you, I want to tell you where it comes from. Because what you are about to do is not new. It is not a fitness trend invented last decade. It is something soldiers have been doing for generations, and the reason they kept doing it is simple. It works. A century of soldiers running to rhythm. Cadence running grew out of the oldest military tradition there is, the march. Long before armies had supply trucks or helicopters, soldiers moved on their feet. Hundreds of miles, sometimes thousands, over terrain that would break a modern runner in an afternoon. They moved in formation, in step, coordinated by drum or shouted command. The drum was not decoration, it was technology. It solved a problem every commander of a large moving force faces. How do you keep hundreds of men, each one tired in his own way, each one carrying his own particular doubt, moving together as a single coherent unit? You give them a beat. You give them something external to follow, something that exists outside any individual man's willingness or reluctance. The drum does not negotiate. The drum does not care that your feet hurt or that you slept badly or that you have doubts. The drum beats and you move. European armies refined this for centuries. Napoleon's infantry was famous for its speed, in part because French soldiers were drilled in marching cadence to a degree that competitors had not matched. By the time the United States military was building its modern training infrastructure in the 20th century, cadence had evolved into something more powerful. The Jody call. The Jody call. The Jody call is a call and response chant led by a drill instructor, rhythmic, repetitive, loud. It kept the pace, coordinated the formation, and built morale in a way no amount of inspirational speech could match, because the morale was not generated by words alone, but by the shared physical experience of moving in rhythm, breathing together, suffering together, continuing together. Recruits did not think about individual steps. They responded to the call. The call was the commander, and their bodies fell in line. This is not mysticism. This is what happens when you give an overloaded mind a single clear signal to follow. Everything else quiets down. You are about to experience the same mechanism. Not in formation, not with a drill instructor, but through carefully engineered cadence music that does exactly what the Jody call always did. Provide the external beat that commands the mind when the mind would otherwise command itself into stopping. What the military discovered and why it matters to you. The military did not design cadence running with neuroscience in mind. But what drill sergeants discovered through practical experience maps precisely onto what researchers have since confirmed about the brain under physical stress. Here is what cadence actually does to the mind. It eliminates the negotiation. The man who has quit running 4 times has spent every run negotiating with himself from minute 1. Pace, effort, discomfort, time remaining. The untrained mind manages all of it simultaneously, burning cognitive resources on internal argument rather than the actual run. Cadence removes most of this. When you have a beat to follow, the beat manages pace. The mind stops arguing because it has a clear directive. The negotiator loses its opening. This is why the man who grinds, who trains, who considers himself mentally tough, this man often cannot sustain a run the way he sustains a gym session. The gym gives him structure that removes the negotiation. The unstructured run hands the negotiation back to the untrained mind. Cadence solves this. It suppresses the negative thought loop. Physical stress generates doubt. Every man reading this knows this feeling. The cascade of thoughts that begins somewhere around the point where the effort gets real. Too hard. Something feels off. Maybe today isn't the day. In an unstructured run, these thoughts find purchase. They grow. They win. Cadence interrupts this cycle. It replaces the internal dialogue with something external and consistent, a rhythm the mind can lock onto instead of the escalating commentary. The doubt is still there, beneath the rhythm, but it cannot get traction. The brain is occupied with something more immediate, more structured, and more reliable than the negotiator's case. It improves pain tolerance. When the brain is tracking a beat, pain signals from the body still arrive, but they compete for attention with the rhythm. The rhythm, when strong and consistent, wins. The discomfort does not disappear. It becomes peripheral. The brain is focused on timing rather than strain. This is not suppression. It is reorganization of what the mind is attending to. The pain speaks. The cadence speaks louder. It builds automatic discipline. Over repeated exposure, the pattern of hear the beat, match the stride becomes reflexive. The runner does not decide to maintain the rhythm. He maintains it because that is what the training has made automatic. And automatic behavior is reliable behavior, which is exactly what you are trying to build. Not a man who has to decide to run. A man for whom running is simply what happens. From the parade ground to your morning run. The tradition I have just described was not designed for elite athletes. It was designed for ordinary men, young, scared, tired, physically challenged beyond anything they had previously experienced. And it worked on them. Not because they were exceptional, because the system is that effective. You are not running in formation with 50 other soldiers. You do not have a drill instructor shouting call and response into the morning air. But the core mechanism is identical. Instead of the Jody call, you have music. Tempo-matched, rhythm-forward music engineered to do what the cadence chant has always done. Provide an external beat the mind can follow, a rhythm the body can organize around, a signal more reliable and more commanding than the internal voice of doubt. The military used cadence to coordinate groups. You are using it to command yourself. The principle is the same. The results follow the same pattern. Where to find the music? Here is where the system lives. The cadence music built specifically for this method, engineered for the exact tempo ranges that activate the rhythm mechanism, layered with the coaching voice of Sergeant Ragnar calling you through the hard parts, is available at Metal Cadence. Go to metalcadence.com and you will find the full library. This is not a generic running playlist. It is a purpose-built cadence training system. The music, the coaching, the method, all in one place. If you prefer to start with the free content before committing, search at Metal Cadence on YouTube. The channel has guided cadence runs, coaching from Ragnar, and enough material to get you through the first weeks of training without spending a dollar. Watch a few videos, run to one. Feel the difference between an unstructured run and a cadence run. Then you will understand what you have been missing. YouTube. Search at Metal Cadence. Free guided runs, coaching, and cadence training content. I am not going to spend more time selling you on this. The run will do the selling. Try it once with the cadence, and you will not need to be convinced of anything.
When your body locks into rhythm, your mind falls in line.
What cadence actually is. In running terms, cadence refers to the rate at which your feet contact the ground, measured in steps per minute. Most uncoached runners, the men who have started and stopped, who run without a system, fall between 150 and 165 steps per minute. Experienced distance runners typically run between 170 and 185. The gap matters, but not primarily for the mechanical reasons most running coaches emphasize. The reason cadence matters is what a consistent, metered beat does to the mind. External rhythm organizes internal chaos. When you run to a beat, you hand your movement a commander. When movement has a commander, the mind stops having to argue with itself about every step. The cognitive load drops. The negotiator loses its leverage. The run becomes manageable in a way that has nothing to do with fitness level and everything to do with mental organization. Finding your beat. Pick a tempo between 160 and 175 beats per minute to start. The Metal Cadence library at metalcadence.com is calibrated to this range. You do not need to calculate anything. If you are using your own music initially, there are free BPM detection apps that will tell you the tempo of any track. The goal at this first stage is not precision. You are not trying to match the beat on every step with mechanical accuracy. You are establishing the relationship between your stride and an external rhythm. Think of it less as marching and more as finding the groove, the place where your movement and the beat cooperate rather than fight. Start with 20 minutes, not an hour, not maximum effort. 20 focused minutes with a beat in your ears and your attention on keeping your foot strike close to that beat. Notice what happens to the texture of the run when the rhythm settles. Notice the difference between the moments you are with the beat and the moments you have drifted. This is data. You are learning the system by using it. Structure as freedom. The man who has been training hard, who uses words like discipline and grind, sometimes resists the idea of imposed structure on a run. He has fought hard to feel free in his training. He does not want to feel like a recruit being managed. This is backwards, and I want to be clear about why. The unstructured run feels free, but in practice it is dominated by the negotiator, by reactive, complaint-generating, comfort-seeking patterns that the untrained mind defaults to when given no alternative direction. You are not free on that run. You are at the mercy of every passing impulse and sensation. The man who has quit 4 times has experienced this freedom. It has not served him. The cadence run imposes structure. Within that structure, the mind is freed from its most exhausting work. The constant calculation stops. The negotiation loses its footing. The cognitive bandwidth that was occupied by managing pace and arguing with discomfort becomes available for something else. The present moment, the physical sensation of the run, the wide, settled awareness that the scattered mind cannot access. The drill sergeant running alongside his formation does not give his soldiers less freedom by calling the cadence. He gives them more. The freedom to be fully present in the movement, to experience the run, rather than survive it. That is what this does for you.
100 years of soldiers can't be wrong. The rhythm commands. Fall in.
Chapter 7. Obey the beat. The man who has read about running, who has optimized his nutrition, his sleep, his gear, his training zones, who arrives at every new system with a full set of opinions and a willingness to modify the protocol before he has ever tested it. I have worked with this man. He is intelligent. He is motivated. And he is, in the early weeks, a liability, because he cannot stop thinking long enough to actually train. The gym builds this habit accidentally. The gym rewards optimization. There is always something to track, adjust, and improve. That optimization habit, carried into running, produces a man who is managing the run instead of running it. And a man who is managing a run is a man who is negotiating with it. And a man who is negotiating with his run will eventually lose the negotiation. In this chapter, I am asking you to do something that may feel counterintuitive if you are built the way I just described. Stop deciding. Start obeying. Specifically, obey the beat. The gift of removing choice. The man who grinds, who has built discipline around hard work, tends to believe his edge comes from making better decisions under pressure. Often it does, but decision-making under sustained physical stress is not a strength. It is a drain. Every micro-decision on a run consumes bandwidth. Pace, effort, discomfort assessment, time remaining, whether to adjust. Each one is small. Together they are the exact conditions in which the negotiator operates best. Cadence removes most of these decisions. When you obey the beat, pace is determined by tempo and stride length, not by ongoing calculation. The response to discomfort is to return to the rhythm, not to evaluate whether the discomfort justifies stopping. The directive is simple. Stay with the rhythm. For the duration of the run, that directive is not subject to review. It is not open for modification. It is the order, and you follow it. This is not mindlessness. This is disciplined focus. The difference between a reactive mind and a commanded mind is not the absence of thought. It is the presence of a clear directive that the thought cannot override. Stride becomes automatic. Here is what happens over repeated sessions of cadence-based running. The stride begins to automate. In the early sessions, maintaining the beat requires active attention. You are consciously counting, adjusting, correcting. This cognitive effort is distinct from the physical effort of the run and sits on top of it. But the brain is extraordinarily efficient at pattern recognition. It identifies the rhythm, observes the stride, and begins building the neural architecture for automatic execution. Gradually, over sessions, not months, the stride to beat synchronization stops requiring conscious management. The body knows what to do. When the stride automates, the attention that maintained the rhythm is freed. Not idle, available. The man who has spent his whole running life managing pace and arguing with his own discomfort suddenly has mental space he has never had on a run before. That space is where the real training happens. That space is also where the transfer into daily life begins.
The beat removes the argument. When the argument stops, the mind goes to work on what matters.
The reward loop sustains itself. Remember the mechanism from Chapter 5. Rhythmic movement triggers a consistent dopamine response. This is not a one-time event. It is a loop. When the stride obeys the beat, rhythm is maintained. When rhythm is maintained, the reward signal sustains. When the reward signal sustains, resistance to continuing decreases. When resistance decreases, runs are longer and more consistent. When runs are longer and more consistent, the neural pattern deepens. When the pattern deepens, entry into the rhythm is faster and easier the next time. This is the compounding effect that the man who has quit 4 times never reached, because he always exited the loop before it had a chance to pay out. Each early exit felt like a failure of character. It was not. It was an exit before the system could deliver its return. Stay in the loop long enough, and the loop begins to sustain itself. The run stops requiring willpower. It starts generating its own reason to continue. When the mind argues. At some point during a cadence run, usually around the same point where you have previously quit or slowed dramatically, the mind will argue. The negotiator will make its case. Here is your response. Return to the beat. Not a decision. Not an evaluation. Not a negotiation. Return to the beat. Find it. Match your foot strike to it. Continue. The thought is allowed to exist. You acknowledge it the way a sentry acknowledges movement in the tree line. Noticed, assessed as non-threatening, dismissed. Then back to the beat. This practice, noticing the thought, declining to follow it, returning to the anchor, is the mental training that transfers most directly into your daily life. The man who has practiced this 100 times on the road has 100 reps of experience declining the negotiator everywhere else. In the meeting, in the argument, in the 2 a.m. anxiety spiral. Same mechanism, different terrain.
Obedience to the right things is not weakness. It is how a warrior becomes a weapon.
Chapter 8. The first mission. Enough theory, time to execute. Every man reading this has read about running before, has planned a running program, has optimized it in his head before running a single mile of it, and then executed it for 2 weeks before the plan encountered reality and fell apart. This chapter is not a plan. It is a mission. A plan can be modified. A mission has an objective, a sequence, and a standard for completion. You execute it, assess it, and go again. Read the briefing, then go execute it. Today, if possible, before the part of your brain that specializes in postponement makes its case. Pre-mission. Setup. You need 3 things. A route that takes between 20 and 30 minutes at a comfortable pace. Music or a metronome set between 165 and 170 beats per minute. And the decision not to check your pace data during the run. The route should be one you know. Familiar terrain removes variables. This mission has one objective. Don't add others. The cadence music at metalcadence.com is calibrated for exactly this. The first mission run, tempo in the 165 to 170 range, with Ragnar coaching you through the moments that have ended your runs before. If you are not yet set up on the platform, a metronome app set to 168 beats per minute will serve for today. Get the platform set up before your second run. Lace up and go before you talk yourself into doing it tomorrow. Phase 1. The first 3 minutes. Start slower than you think you should. This is not laziness. It is strategy. You're establishing the rhythm before you introduce effort, because effort is easier to manage once the rhythm is in place. The man who starts too fast breaks the rhythm before it can establish itself and spends the rest of the run fighting his own biology. For the first 3 minutes, your only job is to find the beat. Not match it perfectly. Find it. Notice when your foot strike lands close to the beat. Notice when it drifts. When it drifts, bring it back. Gently, without frustration. The drift is not failure. The drift is the training. Every return to the beat is a rep. Phase 2. Hold and observe. Minutes 3 to 15. Once the rhythm is roughly established, expand your attention slightly. Keep one layer of awareness on the beat. It should never fully leave your peripheral attention, but begin to notice other things. Your breathing. Your hands. Are they clenched? Drop them open. Tension in the hands travels up the arms and shoulders and burns energy you do not need to spend. Notice how your relationship with the effort changes as the rhythm settles. This is the data you came for. The man who has quit before needs to feel the difference between an unstructured run and this. That difference is felt in this phase. Pay attention to it. Phase 3. The test. Minutes 15 to end. Somewhere in the final third, the negotiator will arrive. It always does. The legs will be heavier, the breathing harder, and the voice will begin building its case. This is the moment that has ended every previous run. Your objective for Phase 3: hear the voice and maintain the beat anyway. Do not silence it. Do not argue with it. Do not evaluate whether it has a point. Stay with the beat, continue, and observe, with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. What happens when you do not comply? For most men on their first cadence run, the voice gets louder for a minute, then quieter. The discomfort plateaus, and something new arrives. Subtle, real, that something has shifted. The run has become something different from what it was before. That something is what you came for. Post-mission assessment. When the run is complete, before you check your phone, spend 2 minutes doing one thing. Notice how you feel, not how fast you went, not how far. How you feel right now with the run complete. Most men report the same thing. Better than expected, clearer than before, slightly less burdened by whatever was sitting on them when they started. This is not coincidence. This is the mechanism operating. And this is the feeling you will return to, run after run, until it becomes as reliable and as familiar as anything in your daily life. This feeling is why the man who finds the method does not quit again. Not because he became tougher, because the run started giving him something real in return.
A mission completed imperfectly is worth more than a perfect mission plan, but never executed. Get out there!
Chapter 9. Breathe like a warrior. Breath is the most underestimated tool in every man's kit. We breathe automatically. That is the problem. Automatic means unconscious. Unconscious means uncontrolled. An uncontrolled breath under physical stress is how a manageable run becomes a crisis, and how a man who is actually capable of far more than he knows ends up stopped, hands on knees, telling himself he is not built for this. He is built for it. He just has not learned to breathe under fire. What breath does to the brain. Your autonomic nervous system has 2 primary modes. The sympathetic mode, fight or flight, fires when the brain perceives threat. It accelerates heart rate, tightens muscles, narrows attention, and floods the bloodstream with stress hormones. It is extraordinarily useful when the threat is genuine. It is actively harmful when it fires in response to a burning quad at mile 3. The parasympathetic mode, calm and perform, is where sustained high-quality effort lives. It is the mode of the man who handles pressure without his thinking deteriorating. It is characterized by a steadier heart rate, more flexible attention, and the ability to receive information without being overwhelmed by it. Here is the critical piece. You can directly influence which mode you are in, not by thinking about it, but by controlling your breath. Extended exhale, breathing out longer than you breathe in, activates the parasympathetic nervous system directly through the vagus nerve. This is physiology, not theory. It works whether you believe in it or not. On a hard run, this is the difference between staying in command and losing it. On a hard day at work, in an escalating argument, at 2 in the morning when the anxiety is running its projections. Same mechanism. Syncing breath to stride. The goal is synchronization, breath that moves in relationship with stride, that has a pattern your body can sustain without constant conscious management. A common starting point. Inhale for 2 or 3 strides, exhale for 2 or 3 strides. Find a ratio that feels manageable at your current pace. Establish it. Hold it. At first, this requires attention and will feel slightly mechanical. This is the learning phase. It does not last long. Within a few sessions, synchronized breath begins to feel natural. The body recognizes the pattern and begins running it automatically, the same way the stride automated to the cadence beat. When breath automates, you have synchronized 3 things: foot strike, beat, and breath. These 3 moving together create something more powerful than any one of them alone. Breathe under pressure. The moment that tests whether you have learned this or merely read about it. The run hits its hardest phase and the breath goes ragged. Heart rate spikes. The negotiator gets the panic it needs. The trained response: extend the exhale. Deliberately, immediately. Push more air out than you brought in. Let the inhale be shorter and the exhale be longer, fuller, controlled. Within 30 seconds, the panic response begins to back down. Heart rate stabilizes. Attention clears. The hill is still there. The difficulty is still there. But you are running it rather than drowning in it. The man who has spent years following Goggins-style content and burning out, this is partly what was missing. Not more toughness. A tool for managing the physiological spiral that ends hard efforts before the body is actually done. The breath is the tool. It was always available. Now you know how to use it.
Breath is not automatic. It is a weapon. Learn to aim it.
The breath is anchor. One final function of synchronized breath. The most important for what follows in part 3. Breath is an anchor. When the mind begins to drift into worry, planning, or replay, the breath is always available as a return point. It is always happening. It is always in the present moment. You cannot breathe in the past or the future. You can only breathe now. The man quietly carrying anxiety, the stress that has no clean label, the weight that is present most mornings and loudest in the quiet, this man has a daily anchor available to him every time he runs. Not a therapy session, not a conversation, a physical, repeatable, reliable tool for returning to the present and letting the noise settle. Use it.
Control the breath. Control the body. Control the mind. In that order. Every time.
Chapter 10. Hold formation. Here is something I need to prepare you for, because if I don't, it will surprise you, and you will misinterpret it as failure. The thoughts do not stop. Even after you have established the cadence, locked in the breath, and the rhythm is solid, the thoughts continue to arrive. The mental chatter does not silence itself because the body is occupied. The negotiator does not retire. The anxiety about the thing at work does not go quiet because you are moving. This is not a problem. This is how the mind works. And understanding this changes everything about how you respond to it. The man who expected the run to clear his mind and found it is not failing. He is encountering the mind as it actually is, possibly for the first time without a screen or a task to deflect it. The thoughts were always there. The run just removed the buffer. Now we learn what to do with them. The 2 wrong responses. When thoughts arrive during a run, most men do one of 2 things. Follow the thought or fight the thought. Following means letting attention migrate into the thought's content. Within 30 seconds, you are somewhere else entirely, while your feet continue by reflex. You are not running. You are walking a mental hallway with your legs on autopilot. The man who has quit running 4 times has lost miles this way without knowing it. Fighting means attempting to suppress the thought, telling yourself to stop thinking about it, getting frustrated when it persists. Suppression is energetically expensive and almost never effective. The suppressed thought does not leave. It waits and grows heavier for being denied. The man who carries anxiety knows this dynamic well. Both responses break formation. Both are unnecessary. There is a third way. Hold formation. The thought arrives. You notice it, you do not follow it, you do not fight it. You note its presence and return your attention to the cadence, the beat, the breath, the ground under your feet. The thought may still exist at the edge of awareness. That is acceptable. It is not in command. You are in command. The evidence of your command is where your attention lives, back on the beat, not wherever the thought led. This practice, notice, decline, return, is the most repeatable mental training available. You will practice it dozens of times on every run. Each repetition is a rep in the gym of the mind, and the man who has done 100,000 reps of this practice over months and years is a fundamentally different man under pressure than the one who has never trained this way.
The beat is your formation. Stay in it.
Why this is the most important skill in the book. Everything taught to this point, the cadence, the breath, the automation of stride, has been preparation for this. Because this is where the real transfer into daily life occurs. The ability to notice a thought and choose not to follow it is not a running skill. It is the foundational skill of mental command. Every reactive decision you have ever made happened because a thought arrived and you obeyed it before you chose to. Every time the negotiator won, it won because the thought it planted was followed before it was evaluated. When you learn to hold formation on a hard run, when the negotiator is arguing, when the thoughts are loud, when everything would be easier if you just listened, you are building the exact capacity needed for the moments outside the run that demand the same thing. The difficult conversation at work you have been avoiding, the hard message you need to send but keep postponing, the moment in a relationship where you feel the pull to exit the discomfort rather than stay in it, the 2 a.m. anxiety loop. All of these arrive as thoughts, and the man who can notice a thought, decline to follow it, and return to his formation has a response available that most men never develop. He does not react. He observes. He chooses. He acts. The run is where you build this. Mile by mile, thought by thought, return by return.
A warrior holds position under fire. Train your mind to do the same when the thoughts start shooting.
Chapter 11. Build the pattern. There is a moment in every man's training when the work stops feeling like work. Not because it has become easier. It has not. The distances are longer, the efforts harder, the standards higher. But the work has become familiar. The patterns have been laid down deep enough that execution no longer requires the grinding, effortful attention of the early sessions. The man shows up, and the body knows what to do. This moment does not arrive suddenly. It accumulates. Run by run, session by session, the neural architecture is built, slowly, invisibly, with the quiet certainty of anything that has been given enough time and enough repetition. This chapter is about understanding what is actually building, so you can trust the process when you cannot yet feel it working. How the brain wires patterns. The brain learns through repetition. Repeated activation of the same neural pathways causes those pathways to become progressively more efficient and automatic. When you run with cadence for the first time, the brain is building a rough trail through unfamiliar territory. For the 10th time, that trail is becoming a path. For the 50th time, the path has become a road, wide, clear, and easy to travel without thinking. The same applies to holding formation under mental pressure, to returning to the breath under physical stress, to declining the negotiator's offers in the final miles. Every repetition of every one of these patterns deepens the neural groove, makes the next repetition fractionally easier. Compounds. This is why consistency matters more than intensity in the early stages. The man who wants to Goggins his way into this, maximum intensity, maximum volume immediately, will produce one outstanding run a week and miss the pattern building that 3 moderate runs would have created. The brain is not moved by peak experiences alone. It is shaped by repeated, sustained contact with the same patterns over time. What you will notice. As the pattern builds, specific things will change. I want to name them so you recognize them rather than miss them. Entry into the rhythm becomes faster. Where your first cadence runs required several minutes of deliberate effort before the stride settled, you will begin to find the rhythm within the first minute, then 30 seconds. Eventually, almost immediately, the body recognizes the conditions and responds before the conscious mind has fully engaged. Reward arrives earlier. The sense of engagement and forward pull that early cadence runs, produced somewhere in the middle miles, will begin appearing sooner and more reliably. The brain has learned the pattern and begins releasing the associated chemistry in anticipation, the way hunger arrives at the smell of food before the first bite. The negotiator loses frequency. Not permanently, not completely. It never retires. But its arguments become less frequent and less compelling. You have beaten it enough times that it knows the odds. And you have practiced holding formation enough times that the return to rhythm is faster than the negotiator's case can fully develop. The identity shift. Somewhere in the accumulated miles, something larger begins to happen. The practice stops being something you do and starts being part of who you are. The man who has started and stopped running 4 times has a specific identity around running. I am someone who tries and quits. That identity is not a character flaw. It is a trained response that has been reinforced by repetition, and trained responses can be retrained by different repetition. The accumulation of sessions, especially the ones where you did not want to go and went anyway, especially the ones where the negotiator had a reasonable case and you declined it, these build a different record. A record that says, I am someone who does this. Not someone who is trying to, someone who does. When that identity shift occurs, and it will if you do the work, the question of whether to run on a given morning is no longer on the table. It has been removed from consideration by something more solid than willpower, by the settled knowledge of who you are and what that person does.
Discipline is not what you do when you feel like it. It is what you are when you don't.
Beyond the run, the pattern you're building does not stay on the road. The neural architecture of returning to the anchor when the mind drifts. That is not a running skill. The practice of declining the negotiator. That is not a running skill. The ability to hold formation under pressure, to continue past the point where motivation has run out, to experience discomfort without immediately seeking an exit. These are not running skills. They are life skills. And the men who build them on the road carry them into the office, into their relationships, into the quiet hours when the anxiety shows up and there is nothing to do but sit with it and continue. The ceiling they have been hitting, the one that has nothing to do with their physical capability, gets raised. Not by reading about mental toughness, by practicing it, one run at a time, in the one environment where all the external scaffolding disappears and the only thing between them and quitting is the training. Part 2 ends here. The pattern is building. The forging is not complete. It is never complete. But you have the system now. You understand what it does and why. Part 3 is what the system makes possible.
Enter it ready!